Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Bula Talofa. Great to have you here. My name is James Elsmore. I'm from Island Innovation, and we're really happy to be working with Mana Pacific to bring together these focus groups. I will just give you a brief bit of technical background before I bring up Joe onto the stage to tell you more about this session. If you do have any problems at any time, feel free to come and find either myself or Isabel. Both of us are here to help, and you can either send us a message or come and find us on a table. We wanted to note that all of these sessions are being recorded, so just for your awareness, and they will be available after the session. If you need to move tables, that's the main thing. You just double click to move your icon. That's it. I think most of you have already had a chance, so I won't go into any more detail than that now. But as I say, get in touch if you have any questions. We're delighted to be partnering on this event in the lead up to the Island Finance Forum, which will be taking place in just under a month, from the 13th till the 16th of April. And we're excited, hopefully, for all of you to join the roundtable that will come out of these focus groups at that event. So thank you very much for Mana Pacific for working with us to bring these together. And with that, I'll hand over to Joe to do the introductions.
Thank you so much, James. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate all the efforts of Island Innovation in supporting us in getting the message out about what we're trying to do for the Pacific Island countries and territories, and with those island countries and territories. First off, we're doing this hand in hand with a number of other organizations, and we're trying to learn as we go. So this is one of 4 sessions to do just that. Today's subject area is primarily on the geopolitical significance of island resiliency and the implications of the different organizations, multilateral, bilateral organizations that play a role in most of the time helping achieve our objectives, but in some cases a role that causes us to need to collaborate with those organizations to keep from causing friction. Before we kick off today's event, though, we're very privileged to have keynote remarks from Ambassador Lincoln Bloomfield. First off, and probably most important for our benefit, Link is our vice chairman of our board of directors for Mana Pacific. And as everyone knows, someone in that role has helped us get to where we are today, and we depend on his expertise from his vast experience with government and international groups to help us achieve our success on this endeavor. Link brings it to this position and certainly to this group background as a special envoy for threat reduction from 2008-2009, and he's worked in both the Department of State and Department of Defense and a number of advisory and leadership roles. Link is based on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., as you might imagine, but he's got ties in the Pacific that make it a special event for him. So I'll ask James to bring Ambassador Bloomfield up to the stage, and we'll look forward to hearing a few opening remarks on resilience in the Pacific Island countries from Ambassador Bloomfield. Oops. Okay. So James, while we're waiting for James to bring Ambassador Bloomfield to the stage, I'll go ahead. There we go. Good. And we have Ambassador Bloomfield. Go ahead, Link.
Joe, James, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. I'm not sure whether to say afternoon, evening, or morning. As you can see, I've dressed the part today. Of our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., for those Americans in the crowd. And I've had to do some things today that required me to dress this way, so I will play the part. I want to welcome all the participants from Hawaii and from the 22 Pacific Island countries and territories across the South Pacific. We're talking about a region that covers 7 million square miles and a huge piece of the earth. This, of course, is the last in a series of 4 focus groups that are aimed at preparing for the Pacific Island Finance Forum that James mentioned in April. And we ask that you pre-register for that. We want your participation. We'll have participants from industry, from utilities, government, and other agencies. The Mono-Pacific team, I want to explain a little bit how we all know each other and why we're all here. It brings together many people with years of prior experience trying to create energy solutions in remote places, from villages in the Caribbean and Africa to small businesses, including some businesses I have visited on the island of Maui, which is where the Mono-Pacific team is now located and operating. Here back in Virginia, my background is in international security. I'm not a electrical engineer or a specialist on utilities or energy. I was a civilian policymaker, as Joe said, in the Pentagon and the State Department and the White House in 5 administrations. And I chaired the board of a nonpartisan think tank for 8 years in Washington that thought a lot about 21st century challenges. And that background led me to the challenge of sustainability and the climate change issue and resiliency. Today, with Mono-Pacific and with other entities, I'm involved with several different projects, NGOs and technologies that will help lower the use of fossil fuels in the world, that are contributing to climate change, and to try to help anticipate serious water shortages and how to manage that challenge in the United States and around the world. I'm very far away right now from where you are, many of you in the Pacific Islands. My mother was a New Zealander. Her father was a politician who honored the indigenous people by giving my mother a Maori name, Irirangi, which meant gift from heaven. So Iri was very popular where I grew up in New England. And I'm very pleased and honored to be part of this effort. Today's focus is the geopolitical and international relations aspect of developing country resiliency and energy independence for Pacific Island countries and territories. It's your issue. It's not something where I can educate you, but what I can say is from my experience in doing a lot of things in the private sector as well as government, that there's a way to deal with people in governments and in international agencies. There's a way to talk to them, to engage them, to know what they want to do, what their job is to do, and to help them do their job and not make them uncomfortable or put them in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is where I hope to be very helpful. Once we listen to you, we want to explore the readiness of the Pacific Island representatives to join in regional agreements with each other on a bilateral basis, on a multilateral basis, whatever makes sense. And one of our key goals here is to unlock the economic benefits for the Pacific Islanders of abundant, low-cost, renewable energy sources. And how that happens is you can listen to Joe and John and James. There are a lot of solutions that involve finance, accessing international agencies and foreign governments. And so that's what we want to talk about today. I'm particularly interested in the strategic location of the Pacific Islands between North America, Asia, Australia, what we now call the Indo-Pacific. It's become an area of high interest to the world with the rising Chinese economy and some of the reactions in Europe and North America who want to engage economically, but also have some differences and have concerns about some of the economic engagements from the Pacific. So the good news is I can tell you that leading advisors, and I was on the phone with one of them yesterday who's very close to our climate envoy in the United States, they now know we can't wait until 2050, even though we talk about goals by 2050. This decade until 2030 is the time when action must occur. We all know this now. If we're going to keep the increase in global temperatures to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we have no time to waste, and we have to be we have to move very quickly, and we have to work together. That's why we're here. So we have an experienced team, we have a shared sense of urgency, and a belief that we at Mono-Pacific can be helpful to our friends and neighbors in the Pacific Islands and territories. And we can do that by listening carefully to your specific needs and concerns to help you achieve your own vision for a sustainable and resilient future. This will be a homegrown project. We're here simply to listen, to help, and to bring some ideas and some methodologies which will make things go faster, will go better, and at a lower cost, and give you the kind of autonomy that you deserve and need, at the same time showing the world that the Pacific Islands are leading the way, setting an example of resiliency and energy security and limiting the contribution to climate change. So I look forward to hearing from the participants. And without further ado, thanks for joining, and I'll turn it back over to Joe Reed. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Link. We really appreciate the comments today. I got to admit that I'm sure I'm not dressed up as nicely as you, but I'm suspecting that the rest of those that are in the islands are probably wearing even less formal attire. I'm actually participating today from California, as opposed to our home office in Maui. So, Mana Pacific, who are we? You just heard from our background. Give you just a nutshell to put things into context. We formed the company in spring of 2019. It's not because of COVID that we didn't have this meeting in 2020. It's because we wanted to make sure that when we did have the meeting, we had it with the right people, with the right approach, and the right message. So we spent an entire year of our group leadership and our board of directors and advisors focused on writing the strategic plan for the company, writing the financial plan, the technical plan. And throughout that approach, the one thing that was crystal clear is that we can't tackle energy resilience for the Pacific Islands one country, one project at a time. So we decided that we needed to unite the approach and unite the islands. Not that the islands do not already have many other organizations in which they work together closely, but we wanted to form somewhat of a union that brought all of these 22 Pacific Island countries and territories together to achieve their resilience, island resilience, and their energy independence. In order to increase the buying power, instead of a single island with a few smaller projects, they now have the buying power of 22 Pacific Island countries and territories when they're approaching the large vendors and large suppliers and developers in the world to try to get the best favored nation pricing. It's only can be done with that kind of united approach. Also in this united approach is the way by which we handle the project on each island. How do we address recycling? How do we address labor and jobs for the people on the island? How do we respect the culture and the icons, the religions in some cases, but certainly all of those key items that are important to the stakeholders whom we are trying to help? Finally, if we can do business the same way on multiple islands and get the best pricing from the people that are going to do the work, it helps us also achieve the best capital access, the ability to bring in the kind of funding and the kind of investments that will invest in large projects with a unified approach, as opposed to the higher risk, smaller projects spread out with a bunch of different approaches to doing business. That's what Mana Pacific is intending to do. And as Link mentioned, this is the fourth of four different focus groups trying to talk to different stakeholders in that Trans-Pacific process, that Trans-Pacific agreement. The first set of stakeholders we spoke with were the vendors, the developers, the private companies that are going to be involved in it, to make sure that they were committed to what we're trying to do. The second group was regional leaders at each of the different islands to talk about the types of agreements, the types of relationships that they already had that would help multiply the effect of the approach. Apologies for that. The third one was access to capital. We brought in a number of capital investors, a number of institutions, a number of different grant parties to talk about how we could get the best from that group. And then finally, this group is to talk about the geopolitical considerations, both the friction and the types of organizations that exist from government groups to help us achieve this objective. And so that's what we're up to. That's where we're going. And before we kick off, I'd like to introduce you to one of our founders, John Miller. John is the president of Mana Pacific and has a unique background with this specific approach that I'd like him to share with you. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Joe, and thank you, Ambassador Bloomfield. I think both great speeches, and yeah, I'll make this short, but I wanted to go into enough detail for those that are joining us in this fourth roundtable. And for those that don't know how this kind of started, this is sort of a legacy project as well, for my former mentor, the late High Chief Utu'e Malai, who many in Samoa called him the godfather of Samoa and Greater Polynesia, or in the Pacific, they called him the protector of the Pacific. And as Lincoln Bloomfield said earlier, it's about unity and coming together. And Joe talked about how we can bring everyone together and leverage the resources of people as a collective, and through unity and strength is the way we're going to be able to solve these issues. And that's exactly what Utu did. He first started solving islands on problems on an island by island basis, but he really saw it was the strengths of everybody together that could solve the largest problems for the Pacific. And I think a lot of these problems we can, of course, solve for the greater world, especially when it comes to climate change. And what it was 17 years ago, Utu'e Malai with 17 of his colleagues and former CEO and managers formed the Pacific Power Association, which was a collaborative effort to help unite the islands and solve these problems rather than one utility at a time, consolidate the resources. And now we're kind of taking that into the next level as we address climate change, because Utu's greatest belief is he really had a belief that by returning the Pacific Island communities to the ancestral ways of living in self-sustaining manner, which operates in harmony with their environment, we're able to create jobs, reduce waste, spur economic activity, and more importantly, restore the cultural identity of the Pacific. I think it's through that empowerment that's truly going to help transform the Pacific Islands and truly be that example for the rest of the world of how transitioning to renewable energy isn't just economically feasible. It really helps with our prosperity and our unity, and really getting back in touch with our culture. So with that, again, this is a curative, a collaborative effort. We basically take a lot of lessons learned that Utu and some other utility leaders and other politicians we've learned along the time that have introduced us to. But through that process, we've learned that as much as we find a problem and then come up with a solution, and we're so excited to kind of move forward, we always seem to find another major hurdle that could become a problem down the road. And we've learned that the answer to this is to continue to listen and continue to listen, because there are many challenges. But we believe by all of us working together and bringing your ideas into the solution, so this isn't our solution, this is everyone's solution, together, we think we can really make this work. And this is a very important roundtable for me. I think, geopolitical issues is something I'm actually not very well versed in, so I'm also here to learn as well as just listen. But this is something that the more and more we talk about, this could be the make or break type of roundtable and discussion that's going to make this happen. Right now, I think we see, geopolitics right now. This is the breaking point. There's a lot of things going on. This is what drives the money. And I think if you guys can help us find the right solution to solve some of these geopolitical issues and smooth them out, I think we can really make this a reality and make the biggest impact we can in the Pacific. So thank you so much for your guys' participation. And more importantly, like Joe said, the April event is what we really want you guys to come to as well. That's gonna be exciting. We have some really exciting speakers are gonna be announced, and we'll send it to you guys in an email. But thank you again. Aloha and mahalo.
Thanks, John. And so without further ado, now is the time when we get to break out into small group tables. As James mentioned and sent some information out in the chat session, there'll be 4 different groups. You'll get an opportunity to participate on 2 different tables. So when you go to a table now, go to the one that's your first choice. If perhaps your first choice is not available, go to your second choice, and then go to the other choice, for the second half of the session. We'll come back at the very end with about a 15-minute summary of all of the different lessons that we've learned from the different tables, highlight a few of the key speakers and the key bits of information that we got in our breakout groups. So look forward to seeing you. I would advertise my table, but I suspect the first one to fill up will be Ambassador Bloomfield's. So James, if you could go ahead and release us back to the tables, please.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I think I will invite Joe to the stage. Yes, Joe.
Thank you very much, Isabel. I appreciate it. And if I could please also invite John to join me, and then we'll just turn our video off when we're not talking. I'd like to highlight, from our different tables, a couple of some of the neat feedback I got, certainly from the participants on my table. We talked about the Conference of Parties, COP26, that's upcoming, and I had what I've decided now, John, is one of our chief new advisors that we're going to turn to every time I get the opportunity. Isabel, if you could bring Christine Milne, M-I-L-N-E, up on stage. I'd like to just assume that Christine must be the great granddaughter of my favorite author, A.A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh, one of my favorite kids' books. But once Christine gets on stage, I'll let her indicate whether or not that's true. But Christine Milne was talking about her experience in a majority of the different COPs that have occurred, parties that have occurred over the years, and she really grasps the breadth of issues that we're trying to tackle between money and the intent of the countries and the parties that are investing. So James, Isabel, if one of you could bring Christine up on stage, I want to give her. There we go.
But Christine, you have to open your camera and your microphone, and I will. Yeah. So.
Thank you so much. Christine, if I could get you to share with the group just a little bit about two of the themes that you shared with me that transcend, I would say, the face value and the face intent of the COPs, and how it really is, it's an intricate group of people that sometimes have vastly different end objectives that are trying to accomplish good things. So if you could just take a minute to share, Christine, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank you, Joe. I've been a veteran of the COPs. I started my COP experience with COP4 in Buenos Aires, and I've been at the majority of them ever since. Of course, there is an intent to address global warming, but it is always a national sovereignty, always trumps the collective outcome. And so this is where donor-driven finance really affects the Pacific Islands, because even though the Pacific is the most vulnerable and they use the Pacific to demonstrate how severe global warming is, when decisions come to be made at the COP, the donors lean on their countries, on the countries to which they make the greater donations, to vote according to how the donor country wants. So whether it's the EU, whether it's Australia, whether it's the umbrella group or whatever. So the geopolitics of the COP really come down to overseas aid money or investment in countries is relying on a quid pro quo of the votes at the right time, accommodating not the interests of the Pacific Islands, but the interests of the donor countries. And that also applies to aid funding when it comes to renewable energy projects. And as a couple of comments have been made in the sessions, These are donor driven, so that Pacific Islanders don't necessarily get the right technology in the right place and absence of local benefits. So in the absence of local people being employed with capacity building, maintenance and so on, the projects don't last and undermine the whole conceptual framework of moving to a low carbon economy. So my overwhelming impression is that creating a collective, serious, hard position for the Pacific Islands is critical in any of these negotiations, so that the divide and rule, which is the strategy that is employed by the donor countries against the Pacific Islands, cannot undermine their position. And I have to say the Pacific has fought back in recent years, and getting the 1.5 in the Paris Agreement was an indication of what collective action can actually do. So that would be the overwhelming, my overwhelming observation is divide and rule has been the killer. Vulnerability to having whatever the donors are prepared to give, rather than fighting back and saying, this is the framework, this is what we will accept, and it has to be in those in that capacity. The third thing I think in relation to finance is that those global institutions actually understand the needs of those countries, and right down to the private sector. And I can elaborate on that at a later time. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much, Christine. And John, if you could rejoin me on stage, I just wanted to certainly introduce her because, first of all, she's the first person I've met from Tasmania out of all the groups that with whom we've spoken, and her vast experience representing things that help the climate, I think is going to be a great value to us. So, John, I'd like to give you an opportunity to highlight some of the feedback from your table, and then we'll go to Link, Ambassador Bloomfield, after you, John.
There we go. My mic's back on. All right. Yeah, thank you, Joe. No, and to that point, I'll make this one ours short, but I think that's the really important thing here is this quid pro quo issue we've come up with, and that's actually some of the conversations we're going to be getting in touch with, because that seems to be the what people are asking of us. So I think finding ways around that, to sidestep that, will be very critical, and that's why I think it's so beautiful the people we meet here. They can help us solve these problems. For us, we talked about, again, a plethora of issues, a lot of them that we went off again on different tangents that I think unveil new things that we didn't realize. But the quickest answers we found was interesting. Is one was interconnectedness. I think getting a lot of the people involved. During COVID, it's very difficult for us to have these in-person communications. So virtual has been kind of the way the Pacific Islands have been going, even though they've been COVID-free. They've still taken those precautions. So it's been working, but it's very, very big difficulties. But one of the most important things I think is we saw keeping conversations short and keeping them concise because of people's attention, I think, is the best way to get them involved. But we have a major challenge of a lot of countries don't have access to good internet service and connectivity, and not only will that help hurt us in our collaboration efforts, it seems to be a thread that these smaller countries or less developed countries that don't have as great of internet access, they seem to be kind of left out of the conversations of all the roundtables, not just ours. So, which is really unique, because we had the same conversation with the cooperative in Washington, and internet service was kind of the key that brought them access to and happiness to everything else. So I think, as well as we address energy, I think addressing their connectivity is something we have to do in parallel, or we're going to continue to run into these problems. So.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. So I'm going to ask if we could please get our other two table groups to join us on stage. Ambassador Bloomfield and Ms. Hammock, if you could come up and let you summarize any experience that you'd like to share from your table. And I know that Ms. Hammock would like to talk a little bit about an organization that she's been working with that I'm absolutely positive is going to be really involved with some of our microgrids in the Pacific. So Ambassador Bloomfield, I'll let you go ahead, and I'll turn off my cam for a minute and leave you on stage.
Thank you, Joe. I'll be brief, but not because we didn't have some really interesting input. I think Mono-Pacific came into this exercise convinced that there are unique local needs, that the islanders need to tell us what they really want and what they need. We were talking about sort of geopolitical concerns and the role of major governments in the East and the West, and the kind of financial power that they have and technology power, and how does that affect what happens on the islands. And what we heard on two different tables were specifics, which will come out in the notes, that are very interesting, that a lot of projects are brought in essentially with a bow wrapped on it. Everything is decided, all of the components are there, sign one contract, it's the lowest cost bid, and that is how they access international financing from the Asian Development Bank, for example. And so it's very easy, but at the same time, the result may not be satisfactory. There's no knowledge transfer, there's no social benefit, there are no jobs, and the final product may not be satisfactory. And so we are hearing that what we thought was true has been validated, I think, that we need to listen more closely as to what the different local people want and what their concern is. And it's not just energy, it's telecom, it's water, it's other forms of resiliency and sustainability. And the comment that Christine just made, that there's power in having a common sort of a common program and a commitment to a common program and a common voice, that would empower them. And this really, I think, comes back to some of us, Joe and John and I and Catherine and others who are involved. We're not here to try to bring in the geopolitical giants. That's not what we want to do. What we really want to do is advocate for the locals with those geopolitical giants, the ones in the West, and get them to do the right thing and get them to do what they may not be doing now. And so we need more detail. We need more lessons learned. We need more stories of regret that can be fixed. And then we need to take that story, because I think there's high interest now politically, maybe not for all the right reasons, but I think this is the time to tell governments what you need from them, how to do it right, and do it on the terms that the locals dictate, not the big powers that have the technology and the money. So that's really my summary, and I'll turn it over to Catherine. If she will unmute.
There we go. 2 clicks. We had some very interesting conversations, and you hit it right with the energy, water, telecom nexus, is that the three are very closely linked to each other. And I think that's going to be a solution or an offering to the island nations that helps breed success and helps them attain autonomy or maintain autonomy versus dependence. One of the things that the organization I'm in, GBCI, is doing has a third-party validation, a certification program for microgrids to certify their resilience and their reliability. Because one of the things we're seeing as microgrids and energy storage and renewable energy systems advance is you're seeing a lot of people say, oh, we can do that too. And they don't have the expertise, or they don't even know what right looks like. So the PEER certification program provides a catalog of things that microgrids should be considering. And as we're certifying projects, they're saying, you know, it made us think. It made us look at the kind of things we could be doing to increase our resilience, because it's really about resilience. You want to be able to depend upon that power grid. Just like a project I worked with in Texas, the Texas power grid went down, but their certified microgrid stood up, and they were able to provide warming centers and food and shelter. And that's really what you want your power system to do. You want it to be dependable. You want it to be reliable. And AJ Perkins, who is on my table, really was made a comment that I embraced, and it was doing right about the people we serve. And that's really what it's all about. We want to do right by the people and ensure they get what they're expecting and get what they're paying for. And so really, I think we're on the right track. I think we've got a great group of people involved, and I'll enjoy hearing from others. Thank you very much, Link and Joe.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Link. Really appreciate having your wisdom and experience hosting the tables today. I don't think that we could have put a better group of people together to try to get the ideas from the participants, as well as share some of the experience that you had as well. To reiterate the point that you just heard, it's not about what Mono-Pacific's objectives are. It's about what Mono-Pacific can help these 22 Pacific Island countries and territories do to achieve their objectives. We think that we know what some of their resiliency requirements are, where we think they want to go, but we never know that until we actually speak with them and we get the kinds of feedback that we've been getting today. Great comments from Christine. I look forward to working with you as we go through this. I look forward to getting to the end of this journey and having people like Christine say, wow, somebody really went out and did what they said they were going to do on these islands, as opposed to went out and got a lot of good jobs for some big company in California. Okay, I say that because I know big companies in California. We look forward to really accomplishing the goals and objectives that the islands want to accomplish. And we look forward to having you join us in that journey. We also look forward to having you join us on the 14th of April for the Island Finance Forum Roundtable, when we'll all be together with, looks like now we've got probably 50 to 60 different participants minimum that will be on that session. I think I've got an inside discussion going on. I think it's going to go over 100, but the big challenge will be making sure that we can make 100 people all feel like they're in an intimate setting sharing ideas. We really appreciate your participation today. For those that have participated in multiple sessions, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in April. I believe the tables will be open for a little bit. If you'd like to talk to other individuals one-on-one for another 15 minutes or so. But at this time, we'll be closing the stage down and going back to the tables for direct collaboration with others. Thank you.